I have recently heard that The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis is one of the most dark and convicting books for Christians, so I've decided to read it to see if I, your average Christian, would enjoy it, and to see if I would get convicted for anything in this book. And little did I know that once I got past the halfway point of this book, I would get shocked several times about how really disturbing and convicting this book is, enough to force me to make a pretty major change in my life by the end of this video. So far, from what I can tell, this book is an allegory about people who are, I think, essentially in hell, get a bus ride opportunity that takes them straight to heaven, and they can get on if they want, go straight there, and stay there forever. But I think most of the book is about these people struggling to let go of what they love in quote-unquote hell, and having a hard time getting on the bus and staying on the bus and making it to heaven, which to me is such an interesting idea for a book. And I can definitely see a lot of ways in which this story might be a little bit difficult to read or like to hear about as a Christian, but I'm also just excited to read more. I love C.S. Lewis, and it's been a while since I've read one of his books, so I'm very excited to get into this one. What has happened so far is that all the people from like the gray town is what they call it, which I think is supposed to represent like hell, they all get on a bus and travel to heaven, or at least what is supposed to represent heaven. I love how in almost every single C.S. Lewis fiction book there's a new world or a new land that he describes. He explains every detail of like the grass and the trees, and he's just so good at coming up with beautiful scenery and explaining it very well. So far all these people from like the gray town are experiencing this beautiful place, and the idea is that the bus has dropped them off. They can stay if they choose to stay. If they want to, they can stay there forever. But the bus is also going to go back to the gray town in a bit, and anyone who wants to go back is going to get back on the bus and go home. And so you'd think the decision would be very obvious for all these people to stay because it's heaven, but it's so interesting to hear everyone's arguments as to why they would rather go back to the gray town. They meet someone who's living in this heaven who was a murderer on earth, who is clearly forgiven, but there's some very pretentious people on this bus who think that because a murderer is there that they shouldn't be there, that they should be in a better place than where a murderer is. And it's just so interesting. It goes into a bunch of different people's perspectives on the little things in life that they're caught up in, their pride, how they think very highly of themselves, the little material things that they live for, and all those little very subtle details of life are what's majorly impacting their ability to stay in this good place. I just came across this quote of one of the people who do live in heaven who are trying to kind of convince the other people to stay. He said, "Don't you remember on earth there were things that were too hot to touch with your finger, but you could drink them all right? Shame is like that. If you will accept it, if you will drink the cup to the bottom, you will find it very nourishing, but try to do anything else with it and it scalds." I think it's trying to say there that although shame is a painful thing, if we address it and acknowledge it and just kind of accept it, it helps us to kind of like swallow it down and overcome it more. Whereas if we try to ignore it or just suppress it, it starts to take over. And that's essentially what these people who are living in this heaven are trying to tell the ones who are debating whether they're going to stay or not, that they need to let go of their pride, of the little things that they're holding on to so strongly, and instead just give it up and accept, kind of like give it up to God. But these people have a really hard time doing that. So I've been loving buying books from thrift stores lately. I recently found out that I have a lot of them very close to me, and they almost always have really good books for very, very cheap. So I decided to take a quick break from reading The Great Divorce. I'm currently at a thrift store and I have $10, and I'm going to go shopping and see how many I can get for these $10, just because I wanted a little bit of a break for reading, and I think this could be a lot of fun. And it's been a while since I came, so I'm very excited to see what books they have. I just love shopping through the store. There's so many other fun things to look at along with books, and on this day specifically there were a lot of good book options. Pretty much the whole time I kept thinking about The Great Divorce and how I was excited to get back home and see what was going to happen next. So I didn't take too long to shop. I picked out all my books pretty quickly and then left. I'm back and I ended up getting a pretty good selection. There's a whole section there dedicated to Christian fiction books, and they're all only $3. I looked pretty much everywhere in the store. There were a few other places that had books, but the cheapest ones, and honestly just the ones I wanted, were in this Christian fiction section. So I ended up getting 3. The first one is called If It Rains. I've actually seen this book in a few different stores for a while now. It seemed pretty interesting and I've been wanting to get it for a while, and so now that I saw it here and only for $3, I feel like I had to get it. Then I got Leota's Garden by Francine Rivers. I don't think I've heard of this book before, and I honestly don't love the cover, but it's by Francine Rivers, and I read several of her books at this point. Some of them I like more than others, but all in all, I know she is a really good writer, so I figured why not get another one. And then the last one I honestly just got because I thought this was a really cool cover. It's called Beneath the Night Tree. I love this color as well. I also don't know much about this one, but I read the synopsis and it seemed pretty interesting, so I figured I would just get it and try it out. So those are all the books that I ended up getting. So happy that I actually found some good ones. I was afraid I wasn't gonna be able to find anything, and all it took was that $10 bill, and I still had a little bit of change left over. So that was very, very nice. So that was a fun little break from reading, but now I'm gonna go back home and get back to it. When I got home from shopping, I worked on trying to find a place to squeeze these new books, and then I went back to reading The Great Divorce. And although I was really liking it, I was starting to wonder whether it would actually impact me as much as it does for other people, because nothing too crazy was happening so far in the story. But like I said, just a little past halfway is when things really started to hit me. That would eventually shift the way I think about a lot of things and force me to make a pretty big change. So chapter 9 is a really long chapter in this book, and it's about halfway through the book, and I'm about to be finished with chapter 9, and I feel like I'm starting to understand what people mean when they say that this book is so convicting, because I think when going into it, I expected the people from the gray town, the people who are supposed to be in quote-unquote hell, I expected them to be really terrible people who have done really bad things. Although a lot of them are pretty bad, I'm starting to notice so many things about them that are, dare I say, relatable. Even like certain lines that the people are saying are things that I may have even said before. I know I've heard other people around me say before, and they're not like super terrible things. It's just like little ways that they're showing how they're prideful, or they're very like pretentious type of people, or there's very like subtle selfish things that they'll do. And I think that's kind of what people meant when they said that this book is hard to read, because I think when the average person reads this book and tries to decide which side they would be on, it's not as easy and clear cut as you might think. At this point, my wheels were really turning when it came to some of the convictions that this book had brought up, and pretty soon it would prompt me to make some changes in my life. The book really does make you wonder about all the little things that you might be unaware of that are very subtle and might be hard to notice, and those things that we treasure so much that sometimes cause us to be a bad person, or just putting so much more value in the things that for the most part pull us away from God and make us into a person we don't want to be. It's making me think about that a lot and all the things that I have or I do on a daily basis. But the point is like, what do you treasure? It reminds me of that verse in Matthew, actually. Let me actually go find it. I found it. It's Matthew 6, and it starts at verse 19, and it says, "Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be." I'm almost wondering if C.S. Lewis based a lot of his book on this verse, because that's what all the people on this bus are kind of dealing with. They're holding on to so much in the gray town, and they're holding on to it so tightly, and they're so distracted by it that they can't see the goodness in what's around them when they're in this like heaven place. It does make me wonder how much I love my phone or my computer or my beautiful stash of books that I have on display every day. I don't know, this is just proving to be a great book that gets you thinking, especially as a Christian, when I feel like oftentimes we get very complacent with being a Christian, but there's just always so much room to improve, and that's what I'm seeing a lot through this book. A line that I just found that I really liked is, "There are only two kinds of people in the end, those who say to God, 'Thy will be done,' and those to whom God says in the end, 'Thy will be done.'" This book makes it really clear how actually simple it is to go to heaven and to stay there, at least how seemingly simple it is. Like, all you have to do is let go of your selfishness and let God's will be done. But it's so clear with all the people on this bus that that's actually so much harder than it seems. I'm getting really close to the ending of this book right now. In the story, basically the main character finds who he calls like a teacher in heaven, and the teacher is going on and on, kind of like giving this long speech to the main character, just basically answering all of his questions he has about this heaven. And I can tell that the main character is finally starting to understand the way things work and the ways that he might need to change. But I'm so curious to see what will happen in the end, whether this main character is going to choose to stay in heaven or whether he's going to choose to hold on to his pride or his selfishness and get back on the bus and leave. But I think I'm so close to that point, so I'm very excited to see what happens. The more I read this, and specifically the more I read about the sinful people and their thoughts and their opinions on things, when they talk and they complain and they go on and on about all their selfish desires, it really makes me want to like, I don't know, never argue with someone again, or like get off my phone and stay off my phone for the rest of the day, or I don't know, just like do everything I can to not be like the people in this book. And I think that's because the way that these people act isn't that crazy. It's actually kind of normal. A lot of people act this way. I act this way, which just really makes me want to do something to change it. Not that I can fully change it. Like obviously I can't get rid of all my flaws, but still I want to make a big change. Like I want to commit to reading my Bible more, or like I said, stay off my phone more, or just do something. I don't know. I literally just finished The Great Divorce. This ending was so good. I felt like I was really bracing for one specific thing to happen, and something totally different happened. Like the conclusion kind of blew my mind a little bit. I'm not gonna say what happened. I don't want to spoil anything, but I really think that you should read this. Nothing else, just to see what happens at the end. It was just so cool. But even though I was finished reading this book, I wasn't finished with learning more about what the book taught me. I immediately wanted to go read more in that chapter in Matthew, and then later a passage in 1 Timothy, and then Proverbs. Later I deleted some apps off my phone, and then I even went through all of my books and decluttered everything and found several that I wanted to unhaul and donate, which finally opened up room for the new ones and then some. Obviously you don't need to do all these things in order to listen to what the book is telling you, but I kind of like how this book convicted me to make some changes. So even though this book might be a tough one for Christians to read, I think because of that everyone should.